Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Crosswise, the technology variety show that is brought to you by pure chaos today, and I really do mean chaos between browsers, audio interfaces, and, well, quite frankly, my guests. We're going to have a good show. Now, look, I've been wanting to get this panel back together again for some time, and we've tried to make this work, and I think the joys of trying to schedule three different time zones. If I remember
correctly.
All
East Coast, I think.
Oh, you're all East Coast. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. 2 different time zones. That's fine. That's fine. Even that has been a challenge. But we are going to be talking about something that is really fond in my memory of tech: handheld computing. Now, what made me smile is when I was talking about this episode with Jay, she's like, "Oh yeah, you got to talk about a Game Boy. You got to talk about the this and all the emulations." Like, no. Jay, wrong type of handheld computing. We're not talking gaming here. We're talking things like Palm Pilots, handspring visors, the Scion, and everything else in between. So let me introduce my panel now. Because of technical issues in my browser, I can't see my panel, but I can hear them. So I think we're going to go in alphabetical order. So, Dan Vincent, welcome back to the show.
Okay, I guess I am first. It's great to be back. Thanks for having us, James.
Oh, my pleasure. Anything new in Newslandia that you want to tell people about quickly?
We did just last week post the VCF East roundup video, which was fun, as I was saying earlier. Not first, but really exciting to be back into producing things on location again. Nice. Which is not a skill set that I normally have, but I learn quickly, I guess. And learning about all the various things that it takes to like be in a live location, because the last VCF before that was back in last September. So I had to relearn everything that I'd learned 6 months prior and do it all again. But it was fun. And oddly enough, all of the people in this call, all the guests in this call, were also at that event.
Oh, yeah.
You need to do a VCF Bournemouth. That's all I'm going to say. Although, actually, me and Dan nearly met, didn't we? We almost did. Because, unfortunately, trains were just an absolute nightmare. I'll come back to that. Now then, let me get my alphabet. Ah, yes. The wonderful Sean from Action Retro, who is currently trying to run Haiku on his kitchen cheese grater.
Trying? No, I successfully installed it, and it's grating cheese right now.
Brilliant. There we go. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about handhelds. Oh, I brought a bunch of handhelds. I know you can't see me, but I'm going to hold one up here. This is probably my favorite handheld here. It's
hey, I've got one of those too.
Commodore here. As you see, it fits nicely in my hand. So I'm excited to talk about handhelds.
Oh, jeez. You see, the thing is, I actually can't see what Sean's holding up. Everyone else can, so we can mark. Not me. Brilliant, Sean. Thank you as always. Sean's channel, of course, Action Retro. Some just absolutely wonderful videos. Always, but recently in particular. I think you've had your fair share of fun and games with Blue Scuzzy there, haven't you, Sean?
Yeah, well, I was just trying to I was making a Intel Next box, and Blue Scuzzy was, for some reason, really fighting me on it. I don't know if it was my SD card or the weird jumble of components I was trying to build with.
What made me smile the most, though, was your choice of processor, because that, Pentium 75, was the processor in my first PC. Not my first computer, nice. My first PC. So, nice. Yeah.
It's a good speed. I don't know why anyone would need more than 75 megahertz.
Well, you don't need more than 640 kilobytes of RAM, do you? So, anyway, and our final, but by no means least important guest, Steve, Mac84. Now,
hey,
how you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Now, obviously, how long did it take you to change the name to Mac84? I mean, was it a big legal process?
Well, there was that Mac85 guy, and, he was so much more popular than I was. So, once that was taken care of, let's say, it was an easy process. So, yeah.
Once you subtracted that one, you got, got Mac 84.
Look, math is difficult for me. That was just, step one of it. But,
I don't know, you got to watch out for that Mac 83 guy.
Yeah, no, you don't want. No, that's you don't want anything to do with them. But I've been tinkering around with stuff. As Dan mentioned, we were all at VCF East in Wall, New Jersey, just in April, so that was a lot of fun connecting in person. But other than that, I've been once in a while trying to put some content out there on the interwebs. Recently, I did a video about VCF, just like Dan did, but I've also been playing around with the Pioneer Macintosh clone, which was pretty fun, and did a little bit of a video about re-PC in Seattle when I was there on business, and that surprisingly got a lot of views for whatever reason, and a lot of questionable comments, but yeah, as videos do.
I was going to say, isn't that just the world of YouTube? I have to admit, so obviously doing my podcast, doing my streams, I have not got round to doing all of my YouTube videos that I really should get on, because I've got lots of cool stuff I actually need to film or, make videos about, and, but I haven't got around to it. But yeah, and Steve, you recently had some fun for Macintosh, if I remember correctly, with opening up Apple Talk to the web.
Yeah, so I didn't invent it or anything, but there was a very smart group of people who were working on it. And somehow I was picked to say, hey, you figured this out, and was sort of administrating a spreadsheet for, that's basically all it was. But my good friend Ron took that over. But it was a lot of fun just, connecting these old Macs. We had some viruses going around, which is exciting, My image writer sort of gave up the ghost a bit. It still worked, but the caps smelled. Like you could go down to the basement and go, what's that smell? Oh, and so that had to be swapped out. But other than that, and other than simple text crashing on a client's computer and sending 100 pages with one line of text to my poor image writer before I pulled the plug, it was largely a lot of fun, and folks are still doing it. So if you want info on that, just go to marchintosh.com and you could find all the information there.
Amazing. All right, let's get started. So look, I'm of an age where I think for me, my first handheld experience was seeing other people with handhelds. I remember a friend's dad had one of the very early, when it was still branded US Robotics, Palm devices. Was it US Robotics?
It was. You are correct.
Yep.
And then 3Com got them, and then Palm split off from there.
That's right. Yeah, I remember seeing one of those. There was a thing where a lot of youth workers that I used to work with had Scions. They all seemed to love their Scions for some reason. And then obviously going through a Palm line. But what about, let's go in reverse order. Let's put Steve on the hot spot. Steve, for you, what was your first handheld experience? We should really start with my first handheld thing.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this earlier. I was trying to figure out if I had a Newton message pad first, if I had a Palm Pilot first, because growing up, I remember a lot of toy computers and sort of pseudo organizer type things. And, if you frequent yard sales or whatever, you might find one, or you get it as a Christmas gift or something like that. And so we had a bunch of toy computers growing up, and I always liked the way that you could sort of organize information, but anything about connectivity, whether it was beaming something somewhere or a serial connection to something or wireless later on, that always, for some reason, excited me. I was like, oh, this is cool. So I want to say the Newton Message Pad 130 was the first handheld I had, and it was on a fire sale from Shreve Systems, which was an old reseller of Apple-related stuff. And I think it was $29 or something ridiculous. Cheap enough where our parents got one for each of us.
Oh, wow.
And it was fun to play around with. It was, really, hey, what can I do with this now that I have this? And the primary function of a Newton is to take notes and organize data. But when you're a kid, what do you have? 3 of your friends' phone numbers? So it was more of, can I draw little pictures? Can I download programs to this and things like that? So that, I think, was really an eye-opening experience. And I would later get a Palm 3E, but I think the Newton was really my first step into oh, wow, you could actually play around with this stuff. And since I had some old Macs, it was pretty easy to get some software onto it.
Nice. Sean, what about yourself? What was your first handheld?
Well, before I talk about my first one, I actually brought one of my favorite handhelds, classic handhelds here. I know you can't see, but this is my Amiga 1200 HD40. As you see, it fits very nicely in my hand. It's kind of a two-hand device, but it is very satisfying thumb feel on these keys. But I didn't have this when I was a kid, of course.
I like that an Amiga 1200 has been described as a handheld. I mean, technically,
you can hold it with your hands.
You can. Do you realize how jealous I am of that? Like, 10-year-old me would have been like, because I had a 600, okay? That was my first computer. And, of course, our friends who were a bit better off than we did, they had the 1200.
Right. Because, it's a better handheld.
Well, there's more of it to hold.
It's more battery efficient.
It only takes 24D batteries.
And runs for about 20 seconds on those.
Need new batteries.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you could also splurge for the 12-volt lead-acid portable battery kit.
I just carried around a car battery.
Yeah, well, they sold those easy neck braces. You could just put it around your neck and just hold it there.
The real pros got the backpack straps for the battery kit.
Right. Yeah. Well, so that's currently my favorite. When I was a kid, though, my first handheld, I don't remember the model of it, but I think it was based on Palm. And it was just some little chintzy, 1-bit screen. And what I specifically remember about it, though, is I found some third-party BASIC app. Ooh. And I was like sitting around in school, like I think I was like writing in BASIC with the stylus, trying to like write programs.
Hang on, trying to write BASIC with graffiti, because graffiti was the But oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I don't clearly remember what it was, if it was graffiti or if it was some like. I don't think it was like Windows CE. I remember specifically it was like, flip open and there was a stylus. And I remember writing in BASIC, and my proudest achievement was I was drawing circles that I could then tap on. But I'm pretty sure it was like writing it in like graffiti or whatever this thing had.
Oh, wow.
I think you need to relive this, Sean, on a video of yours. Write a whole BASIC program with graffiti without crying.
If I could remember what it was that I had.
It sounds like 1-bit. I'm wondering if it was a handspring of some.
Do you remember what kind of was it? Like rectangular case?
I feel like it was small and gray, and this would have been in like 99.
It could
and it was probably a few years old at that point. I think they like bought it secondhand and gave it to me for Christmas or something.
That is sounding like one of the original visors.
Could be, yeah.
Because I should have said that was. I had I can't remember exactly which. I had a handspring visor, and that was a great little device. So I know what you mean. It sounds very similar to it. All right, Dan, what about you? I'm going to guess you've got a wonderful, wonderful story for this.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of what my actual first handheld computing experience, because I do remember my first. I do remember my first PDA. That was a handspring visor platinum.
Oh,
I got it it had to have been in like, I'm trying to remember the year that I got it. It must have been like 2000 or 2001. That sounds truthy. So somewhere it was a birthday present.
Right.
So I remember, we drove over, because I lived in the sticks. We drove over to Crossgates Mall in Albany, New York, to the Best Buy, which had recently opened up there and replaced Nobody Beats the Whiz. And and got that. I want to say that probably was like $250 or something, but I want to say even before that, because I had people in my life who were gadget people. Like, they weren't turbo nerds like we are, but very much like gadget people who are in tune with like that stuff. And I swear somebody had once given me one of those old, like Radio Shack or Sharp little handheld organizers that had a little keyboard, and they had an address book and a date book and, a clock or whatever. Really not much complexity, but I'm sitting there. I remember it vividly with its little LCD display, old style, like maybe two rows of LCD display. And I'm sitting there with a little membrane keyboard trying to like tap it and say, okay, I'm going to put my phone numbers in here. It's actually got a little text thing. It can run a calculator. I'm like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And now when I see those things, I'm like, yeah, it's like, I don't know what I was seeing in it, but I guess when you're, 12 years old, you look at something like that, you think, wow, this is cool. I'm cool. I'm a somebody.
I've got one of these things that usually only my teachers have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because obviously we're talking about maybe more PDAs, but I've completely forgotten that whole category of little tiny, like probably calculator size, like handheld devices, like, the electronic dictionaries, the electronic thesauruses, the little organizers, but for me,
pocket translators that Catherine O'Hara is trying to give away in Home Alone to try to get back to the United States.
She didn't get very far, did she? It was like a quick game show that wasn't. I've got this this organizer. Here, take my second board, or rather take.
Oh, absolutely be like a prize you would get on like The Price is Right. Guess, we got this Sharp personal organizer. How much is that? $99.
Yeah,
who knows?
You're jogging my memory there, Dan, because I think that I either had a Casio one. It was secondhand, like your experience likely was, or you said people in your family had gadgets, and I forget where I got this from, but I remember it like either didn't work or we didn't have the battery for it. But just the concept of like, oh, there's a keyboard and a screen, like that was probably one of my first experiences, even if it was broken.
It is a computer, wow. and it technically fits in your pocket. Yes. So it really does make you feel like, oh, I'm kind of in the future a little bit.
Of course.
I remember I had one of my friend who had the calculator watch, but also had the TV remote.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I knew somebody who had one of those too.
I was the popular kid in middle school with the TV remote watch until I told people. And then it was, all the delinquents in the class, hey, turn off the TV because the teacher's doing such and such. And it's like either I do what they say or they'll beat me up or something, so I had to sort of be slick about it.
I was one of the delinquents.
You were a delinquent. Why does that not surprise me?
We've got more. I'm sure all of us have more delinquency tales of our handhelds in schools.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so, but what my vivid memory is seeing them advertising. Now, this might not mean much to you three, but to our UK audience, if I say the Argos catalogue. Were mail order catalogues like a big thing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
JC
mostly for like toys, but you'd have like general department stores that would send out catalogs or things to entice you, especially on the holidays.
Yeah.
I was actually digging through an old Sears catalog this week for some reference material in 1993 for computer sales, opening up Sears catalog. Sure enough, there's Packard Bell, there's IBM, there's Performance, all right there, along with stereo equipment and other things. Sears catalog and Argos catalog, very much, two brothers separated by an ocean.
Indeed. Absolutely. So we got that little class of device. And then we started getting into the whole idea of a PDA, something that I guess, what would be the best way? Pen-based computing. Because I remember watching, Computer Chronicles and starting to see, more Stuart Chaffee telling everyone, hi, I'm Stuart Chaffee. I tried to reach out to him because the Retro Hour had him as a guest a long time ago, and his email address was on his website. I tried to email him. It's dead. I don't think he is.
Unfortunately, Stuart is he's over 80 years old these days. So unfortunately, we gotta, prayers that he'll keep rolling. But I wouldn't be surprised if he if something happened on that web hosting and he might not be aware of it.
That's a shame, because I always love the Computer Chronicles. I remember seeing it on cable.
He was a big proponent of pen-based computing. You see a lot of episodes where he will talk about Wacom devices. He'll talk about PDAs. He'll talk about all sorts of things. He really was, I think he was a big fan of that stuff.
And when we think about, I think for me, what really has always enticed me about those devices, and maybe I should just lead with this, is watching Star Trek TNG and Deep Space Nine. Maybe not the original series where they had the like Apple's reject Newton, or Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, which is, I'm sorry, the motion picture has its flaws, but Star Trek V is an awful film.
I'll still watch it.
I'll watch it because it's a Star Trek film, but it's basically, an hour and a half, maybe a bit more of William Shatner's ego on screen.
Well, that could be said for anything. I mean, come on.
That was all of that era.
That is true.
So it did give us the great line of, what does God need with the starship?
But there's a bit where he's got this new, like, I think it's meant to be a job, but he's got this new, like, handheld for doing his captain's log. And there's a big, like, almost like a third of the device is taken up with a thing that lights up to say system malfunction.
That's because Sean had a handle on it before.
The install got corrupted.
There we go. But this concept of being able to interact with these handheld devices, that aren't by themselves, aren't what we would think of a traditional computer, particularly back in those days. Wow, that makes me sound old, doesn't it? When your traditional PC or home computer needed a big screen and, keyboard, but you could walk around with all this information and beam your contact cards. Sorry, Jay's okay, so Jay's in the backstage listening in, and she's literally just messaged me while we're recording to say, "You are old, dear." I'm like,
look, we're all on the wrong side of 40 here.
We absolutely, yeah.
I'm slightly under it, but not for long.
Wait, hang on, you're giving me?
Yeah, Steve's a kid.
A little bit.
Oh, whoa.
Just a wee bit, I'm afraid.
Oh.
It's one of these gosh dang Gen Zs.
I'll be 38 this year. So.
Oh, okay, fine. You're still older than
I said just by a hair.
Just by a hair.
Not that I have many hairs. But, yeah. Oh, my back is over 40, yeah. all those laser printers and CRTs made sure of that.
Anyway, so this concept of handheld computing, it's always fascinated me. But where do we think, and I'm going to open this up, just completely open it up, where do we think that it really started to become popular and actually, shall we say, usable?
Well, I brought an example of what I think actually would kind of illustrate that. So when I got this handheld, it has a smaller screen, but it's still pretty nice to carry. And you could kind of beam things by just facing the screen. I don't know, James, if you could see this. It's a Mac Plus.
Yeah, let the record state he's holding up a Macintosh Plus from 1986.
It is a luggable from a certain point of view.
Yeah, look, it's in my hand.
It's got a handle
right now.
He's holding it.
Is this going to be the theme of the whole episode? Just Sean holding up random old computers?
You were warned before we started.
That is true, yes.
This is what happens when we get us together.
I think where I started seeing them was, in TV shows or movies, someone would have something. But I think what's really important to underline here is the first portables that we think of. I think when the four of us think of like a modern-ish type of a handheld, maybe a Palm 3 or something like that. A lot of these, were just standalone devices. They sync to your computer. They could transfer data back and forth and little apps and things like that. But there was no wireless connectivity. There was no internet connectivity. At most you would have an add-on modem years later or something. And if you had such email functionality and the huge amount of memory to store apps and things like that, which would come later as a standalone, a foundational feature set. But I think like a lot of these little organizers were just trying to figure out like the best way to store and make information usable for you. And so I think it's actually really hard for people that are younger than us to think of, we had these devices that weren't connected to a larger network.
Right.
And the only connectivity you had between devices was whatever proprietary connection method that they had for their series. Like Palm had the beaming, and the Newton devices had, a similar beaming functionality. But, it wasn't until, networks and phones and things like that got cheaper and digital assistants got cheaper and merging with smartphones that, there's really a wider connection of networks. But I mean, just looking back and thinking about those devices, I had a heck of a lot of fun, even though they weren't connected to anything,
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think they were still trying to figure out what people wanted these things for. I mean, people obviously thought they were interesting. Like I showed you some examples now, recently. So I don't know if they really count it. I'm going to look up in this full-fledged computer here to see what else I have in stock here. For the record, this is my Scion MX file. Anyway.
What MX? Which one, the MX?
5 MX.
Oh.
Now, this is, as you might imagine, running Linux.
Of course. Wait, it's not running Haiku?
Yeah. No, I don't think that's going to work. I can barely see this screen.
I haven't ported it yet.
Anyway, I can't even tell what it's doing. But yeah, people were trying to see what they wanted to use these things for. I mean, they were just notepads, or were they computers, or were they communication devices? Steve, was that a Dreamcast?
Of course it was. The smallest, most convenient PDA.
The VMU. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's so funny. I had that when I was younger. And I remember carrying it around school. I have a computer in my hand.
Which technically speaking, you did, because it had a processor. I mean,
Right. But I remember my fondest memory with an actual handheld computer. I had an HP Jornada 420.
Oh, yeah.
Which I remember that name specifically because it's funny. And when I was, I don't know, 19 or something, I worked at a skate park in the retail section, and it was hardly ever busy. So I had an external 33.6 modem, parallel modem. And so I brought that and the dock and the handheld to work and hooked it up to the store phone line and was dialing into my ISP and browsing the web as kind of, an early version of what we do now. And I was like, I'm living in the future.
I'm sure they were so happy to see the phone bill.
Well, I never got in trouble, so I don't know if they understood what I was doing up there. He's playing with his toys, and I'm tying up the one phone line for the store.
Yeah.
How many lost sales was that, do you reckon?
They went out of business about a year later, so I'd like to think that it was entirely my fault.
Just the phone bill alone for that long distance
the phone
internet.
bill put them out, yeah.
I love this image you've painted though, Sean, because all of those accessories that you mentioned probably weighed more than the stupid device itself. And that was how these things were. They were great and thin and portable, but if you wanted any sort of expansion, it's well, I got to bring this adapter, I got to bring this cable, I got to bring this, and you're running off of 2 AAA batteries or something like that. So you better have spares.
And it's interesting you mentioned the Scion 5 minutes, because you had the Scions, which were effectively folding little keyboards, and I don't think until later revisions, I don't think the Scions were touchscreen, were they?
They're touchscreen, yeah.
Oh, right, okay, right.
I got a little stylus right here.
Oh, but what did Steve Jobs say? If you see a stylus, you failed. Was that?
And now they have a stupid pencil.
Several stupid pencils.
Well, see, now they're selling a stylus, so it's okay now.
It's fine now, but yeah, absolutely. But
they just haven't told Steve.
But no, he'd be beach balling in his grave. No, sorry, that was terrible.
Although I do think, at least when it comes to handheld computers, I think what actually made them useful to people and not actually like a toy or whatever. I mean, granted, the Newton was ahead of its time.
Yes.
But what made the Palm itself take off was the fact that it was out of the gate. You could immediately see what it was useful for. It's okay, it's got a date book, a calendar. It's got an address book. It's got a notepad. It's got an expense tracker. It's got all of these things where you say, okay, if I'm a traveling executive, Okay. I'm a traveling executive. I'm going everywhere. I have a paper date book that I have to carry. I have a paper notepad that I carry. I have a paper, my fake Rolodex, which is separate from my Rolodex in the office, by the way. So trying to keep those two things in sync, royal pain in the butt. So here you are, Apple is trying to sell you a much more powerful thing for, $500, however much they asked for a new Newton back in the day. And then here's Palm, part of 3Com/US Robotics, saying, hey, here's a much cheaper, much simpler device that's a little more focused that costs half as much. And, people say, hey, I'm a high-flying executive. The fact that I don't have to keep multiple paper books in sync anymore, to them, that's a gold mine, and it fits in their pocket, and you can pitch that to somebody. It's not going to revolutionize the world like a cell phone would, but it's enough to make a actual reasonable business out of it.
Right. And that's the thing. Now, at that stage, this early stage, could you still connect them to the PC? Because Palm obviously had and I'm trying to remember the two terms. I don't know if they started off with it, but Palm had HotSync.
HotSync, yep, that was what it was from the get-go.
And obviously that worked, started off serial, went to USB. Microsoft, I say Microsoft, because we then got the Windows CE and then beyond, gosh, that's a whole thing by itself. That was ActiveSync. And I think if I remember, the difference was that HotSync, you had to press a button. I think ActiveSync.
Yeah, there were a few differences there, because the Palms, at least the ones I've had, the Cradles had a dedicated button on it, but they also had a button on the screen. And so, you could toggle whichever you wanted, but you could also, I think there were some smart things we could just, when you put it in the Cradle, you're attached to a modem, you could just dial, and then it would, eventually connect and do a sync.
Nice.
But yeah, you could do a modem sync with a Palm, which was if you bought a modem and set up your computer so that you could dial into your computer, to a remote hot sync.
How many times I tried to do that as a kid, not understanding that, I needed another computer connected to the only phone line in the house, that, it wasn't going to work out.
Yeah. No, I was very naive when all this was happening. Like, I should be able to just connect to a computer by dialing my house phone line. And my mum would pick up the phone. She's like,
what you trying to do?
What you trying to do? Yeah, I could never convince my parents to get a second phone line. We had rules in our house, because we were on dial-up for, obviously a while. Rules in our house that at a certain time, like particularly if my mum needed to call my nana, no internet for the hour that she was on my phone to nana. So just not a thing now. Palm, obviously, Palm just had such a... they really had a lot of devices in the market running their OS, because obviously you have the Palms themselves. And I just remember, again, people, going all the way up through, the M series. You then went into the latter years into the Palm Tungstens. And I had the
Zyres.
The Zyres, yeah. Because the Zyre was the cheaper model, wasn't it? I mean, you had the Tungsten, which was the nice, and I had a T2. And the T2 had this... it had the slide down where the graffiti pad could be hidden.
I loved that. I had that. That was one of the devices I had. So the first Palm I had was the 3E, and I might have got either just before the Newton or right around the same time as that. And it was the special edition, so it had the clear case instead of a gray case. But of course, it had some sort of firmware bug, and we had to send it in for servicing, and I got just a standard gray one in return. Now I've since remedied this via eBay and very late night searches a few years ago, but at the time, it was a bit disheartening for me. But I remember that thing was quite capable. It was, not the highest end, but it did have some improvements over the standard 3. And then a few years later, my mother had gotten a Palm V. So that was the 5th model. And I think they had a few generations of that. But the really hallmark thing I remember about that, as Dan holds up a pretty one there, is that we had a Magellan GPS attachment to it.
Oh, Steve. Yeah. Am I going to have to go in the other room and get it?
and when I say we used it, I mean, we attempted to use it once, because we quickly figured out that the amount of memory that these maps actually hold on this device, you couldn't even fit an entire state. you had this mechanism where you selected your counties or your routes, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was just basically like, oh yeah, we could load that in, but you can't do this or you can't do that. We tried it once, and I remember like staring at it and not understanding how it acquired the signal and all this stuff. And then the batteries would just drain, and it was, kind of useless at that point. But we must have gotten it dirt cheap because, it was probably an accessory that didn't sell well. But that was like one of the first experiences of, like, wow, this Palm is connected to something other than, myself, even though it's just receiving a signal from somewhere. But just I think just the promise of that, because it was the Wild West of those sort of devices, that everything, even if you had no connectivity at all, it was like, hey, I have this computer. It's in my pocket. It could do things, man. Like, I'm cool now, even though, I have braces and, in middle school,
I've been poking around Palm DB while we're talking. I found the basic. So I told you one of my first experiences. Yeah, it definitely was Palm OS. It's Y Basic.
Oh, okay.
Y Basic. I'm looking at a screenshot of it now, and the input line is just a line, and you would scribble in letters.
That's great.
I sent a video idea.
I can.
I have to go find one.
I think I have a bunch, Sean, you can borrow. You just need new batteries.
Right, I'm on my way after this call.
There you go.
Have it ready.
Yeah, that promise of connectivity, like I remember for my handspring visor, one of the main things about the handspring visor is that it had the cartridge slot on it.
Yes.
And most of the time that cartridge slot's like, okay, I had like an 8 meg memory cartridge, like flash memory cartridge. They actually sold, like, you could buy software like Game Boy game, just like a Game Boy, pop it in. It's like, oh, I'm going to pop in this Tiger Woods PGA Golf and play some golf on my visor. But one of the things I bought for it was a Zircom plug-in 28K modem. This Zircom modem, it didn't have a pop-out thing or a dongle. It actually had the modem port built into it. And because it was that thick, it actually took a battery holder that was the same one as Motorola StarTAC phones. So you could put either AA batteries or a rechargeable battery from your Motorola cell phone into it. And I swear I used that thing maybe 3 times to try to connect to, I'm like, oh, I'm going to plug in the phone. I'm going to try connecting. And I'm like, well, this isn't working very well. And you'd think I would have learned my lesson. But when I got my Casio E125, I'm like, I'm not buying a modem for this thing. No. I'm buying a CompactFlash Ethernet adapter, which I still have in the house, by the way. Wow. I still have it. It's around here somewhere. And that was actually more useful. Like I could plug that in, plug into an Ethernet, because I was in college when I had that. So I plugged it into the many Ethernet ports that they had hanging around. It's like, okay, I can actually use, and I'm thinking, it's like, well, if I could do this, why am I not just bringing my laptop with me?
I was going to say, it's not exactly like you're free roaming me. You've got like the world's longest Ethernet cord to go.
I know.
I never actually got it. I ordered and had a nightmare trying to, because it was from Handspring. I think I couldn't get to make payment for it because they wanted some, like a weird thing, but I can't remember what it was. Mm-hmm. So people wouldn't let me pay with like my debit card or anything because I was only young at the time. I think I was about maybe 16, maybe a little bit older. I was getting the cellular modem for the Handspring visor into that same cartridge slot.
Yep.
And I'm trying to remember, I think it was Handspring who made it.
They did. The visor phone.
That's it. Because I had this idea. I'm going to get rid of my little Sony Ericsson T610, which is the phone I had, and I'm going to have everything on that phone, on my Handspring. I'm going to carry it. Yes, I'm going to carry around that as my main phone. That was my 16, 17-year-old brain. It never turned up, but the promise was so good. But, obviously you mentioned CompactFlash because we then started to get things like, Wi-Fi. As Wi-Fi became a thing, we did get Wi-Fi cards. You got things like presentation cards where they'd have a VGA output so you could plug it into a projector and again, still be not exactly free roaming. You'd still be chained to a projector and looking like an absolute idiot tapping your next slide.
Yes, next slide on your
but
pocket
you had the
PowerPoint.
capability.
Yes.
That was the promise of it. You had that. And this is why we all had fanny packs back then, because we had all these stupid adapters and wires to carry around. I mean, I remember carrying around a Sega Game Gear and an extra 6 AA batteries because, whose pockets are going to fit all that?
I had Jenkos at the time.
Well, I mean, that was
Jenko
the
too?
other. Yeah.
My Game Gear could fit right in the back of them.
You could have 2 Game Gears.
I could have like 20.
Okay, I'm going to throw this
and
out
a
there.
6-pack of Sprite.
Cybacos.
Yeah.
Everybody have a Cybaco.
Now,
I had one.
Now, didn't Cybercos, wasn't that... Okay, this is going to show my age a little bit. Wasn't that in the Frankie Muniz film, Big Fat Liar?
Probably.
I think so. I've never seen it, but I know that a friend of mine in middle school had one.
Wow.
And I was very jealous because there was another kid that also had one. And the promise of wireless chatting, like, because I was using whatever wireless band or whatever. And I just thought, how cool is that? Like with the Palm, it was line of sight with the beaming. But now you have this radio antenna. You could, interact with others. I thought that was the coolest thing. And I think I got one at one of these discount stores or something like that, and it was lime green, so it was perfect for me. And by the time I got it, nobody was using these things.
Yeah,
so
they had a very short
PC
shelf life.
only. Yeah, it was PC only. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't download anything on my Mac or anything like that. But it had the promise of, you get do email with an update that will be on our website sometime soon, and all this other stuff.
Oh, weren't they like mesh networking or something?
Yeah. I mean, but that was the. Yeah, it was. LGR did a great video about that. Him and his brother went around testing the capabilities of that. But what I found so intriguing of those is they really showcased like the peak of 90s consumer electronics versus like kid gadget toys type things, where there were organizers, and then there were like things that were more of like an adult Palm Pilot. And because the electronics were getting cheaper, and because, they were trying to, I guess, find more markets for these than executives, there was a slew of that stuff. Like I think it was a Zip It wireless instant messenger thing I played around with. All these things that would come out later on, where, they were just like before a smartphone was a smartphone and affordable, there was all this crap that tried to take its place.
Well, and the thing is, these devices, this class of, Palm or Windows Mobile, and I don't mean Windows Phone, folks, I mean Windows Mobile and
Pocket PC.
Pocket PC. Well, we're going to talk about that because that's a fun one. They really did give birth to the smartphone. The smartphone concept started in this class of device, and it's really fascinating. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about, because Palm were not the only OS in town. A lot of the handheld, a lot of the makers. So, to my knowledge, obviously Palm themselves, Handspring. I mean, the Palm story. There's a wonderful documentary about what happened to Palm and how it all got like ridiculously sold. Like, I can't off the top of my head. I think didn't they get sold like split up, sold, put back together again, and just But they were not the only OS in town. I mean, Sony's Clie, I believe, used Palm as well.
It did.
Yeah.
Palm had several licensees. Like one that I've got my Garmin IQ here, which I did the video on about fairly recently, not to toot my own horn.
Oh, please do.
And this thing, I still got to say, for a device that was made in 2003, the GPS experience is very, very similar to what you could have in like a 2009, 2010 smartphone in terms of like its capability. Like you didn't have to, unless you could put a big enough memory card and you could have the entire Northeast United States and actually have like point of interest in routing on the device, unlike the previous attempt that Steve was talking about, which I also, which like you put the two side by side and they're like 3 years apart and the difference is shocking in terms of like the capabilities of what the devices can do. But Garmin also sold, like for Pocket PC, they sold GPS dongles that you could plug in to a Pocket PC device and get you basically the same functionality.
And Pocket PC is such an interesting, because you had Windows, and this is where I think things started off. We had Windows CE, which was on like, I guess Palm tops. I remember seeing a lot of Windows CE Palm tops.
Yeah.
there were actually Windows CE laptops too.
What?
Oh yeah, they're out there. And I was like, oh, that's the hip new sub notebook thing. Very much like an eMate, except less, stylish.
That eMate, I got
My
loaned
eMate's in the other room.
Oh, I got loaned one for a while, and what I didn't realize is we were trying to see whether or not I'd like it and they'd let me keep it, and no one had bothered to tell me about it, so I didn't really use it that much. Oops. It was all right. Anyway, but so Windows CE, which, fun fact, I think wasn't some of the Dreamcast powered by Windows CE.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, the kernel of it.
Yeah, they had that little logo on it, which always confused me, and I think like a handful of games supported some type of transfer or something with that.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, just random one for me. I think the Dreamcast feels like the ancestor of the Xbox. There's so much about it that feels like
the guy who was in charge of the Dreamcast went to work for Microsoft.
There we go. Yeah.
No, I just want that Dreamcast zip adapter, the iOmega zip adapter that was a prototype and shopped around. The first time I saw that, oh God, a picture of that, I'm like, I need that now. Mm-hmm. And there were actually a few orange zip disks on eBay a while back, but people couldn't really tell if they were the real deal or someone just like put a label on it and they were going for a stupid amount of money. But yeah,
they made multicolored zip disks. So.
They did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
I've got some somewhere.
This just fits into this whole realm though of like devices trying to do like all these different things. And for better or worse, like some devices, like Dan was saying, would have expansion ports for this or that. And it's just, these things felt like you could do anything with them, even if they were super limited.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, it just fascinates me because I had was it a Compact Aero? So
the
it was before.
iPack.
Yeah, was it? Well, yeah, the iPack, but was it before was the Aero one of the iPacks? I seem to remember that being a slightly different, but the iPack, because that was around the time at was it the iPack HP's one? And
no. So what happened was before HP bought Compaq was making the iPack and HP was making the Jornada.
That's
and
right.
when HP bought Compaq, they discontinued the Jornada and they just kept the iPack going because at the time of those devices, like the iPack really had the market share, which to me was an affront because I thought the iPack was the inferior device because I was a firm member of the Church of Casio because the Casio E125, the best pocket PC, and is the best for 3 reasons. One, had CompactFlash slot built in. When you had the iPack, in order to use a CF slot, you had to put in the stupid sled.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
You had to change out the sleds to get stuff. 2, it had the best screen as long as you were inside, because it had a real, like, active matrix TFT, like, laptop quality screen. And number 3, the buttons were arranged in such a way where you had a D-pad, like, controller on the left side and 3 face buttons on the right hand side. So guess what? You could play games on it reasonably well, unlike everything else, which had like the 4-way with the buttons in the center of the thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But unfortunately, Casio chose MIPS while Compaq went with ARM. And well, history shows that ARM was the winner on that front.
And I think Windows, again, morphed it. So Windows Pocket PC morphed into Windows Mobile, which was like both on the just regular PDAs. I mean, the phones. I remember having it was a HTC Artemis, I think it was. I think it was the Artemis.
That sounds right.
And it was branded as an O2 XDA something.
No wonder these things didn't sell.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it was all the HTC didn't really used to make, they did, but you weren't buying a HTC device. You were buying your carrier's branded version of a HTC, and things like. So I remember having the Artemis. I remember having the what was called the orange SPV M500, which was a candy bar phone running Windows Mobile.
Okay, how many people in this chat, because I know, James, you've already said that you've had, how many of you actually owned a pre-iPhone / Android smartphone, like a Trio or something like that?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah,
Yep.
so I had a Trio. I actually brought one of my first phones. It's right here. I don't know if this really counts as a handheld, but it's a
He's
very
holding
nice
up
form factor.
What's he holding up this time?
An indie.
It looks like, I believe it's an SGI
Well, yeah,
Indie.
technically it's an SGI Indie, but when I was younger, I used this as a phone, and it's fairly smart for a phone.
I mean, if you hit him over the head with that,
But no, like,
you could just tell him anything.
Yeah, but I did have a Palm Trio actually right before I got an iPhone. Yeah,
And I think that's what a lot of people have. What was my? I went Nokia communicator. I went for I had one of a flip open, the 95, I think like the 9500, which was Symbian, which I think
Very popular.
Symbian, if I remember, wasn't that on the Scions?
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
Like that, I believe that was a Scion, like, offshoot.
That sounds right.
No, I just think what's interesting with these devices is the method of inputs, as Dan was mentioning with the D-pad and the buttons, because on the Palm, you always had like the 4 buttons and maybe an up and down. And they did have games. I remember there was a Master System or Game Gear port of Sonic the Hedgehog, the original one for the Master System for the Palm. And I remember it was just unplayable on my Tungsten E2 or whatever it was, because you had like a few buttons, but it was not comfortable to play, and they were so close that you would overlap them. And yes, these were pen-based, but it wasn't multi-touch. You had a stylus, and you could tap in one spot, and that was it. There was no clever swiping or anything. And the only like perfect use case I ever found for that precision was either doodling something or the applications that you could install on the Palms to act as a universal remote. So you could draw little buttons and things like that, but you had to be looking at it. There was no just, I'm just going to feel my way around this. No, it was, there was none of that nonsense.
I don't think I ever saw a Sonic port for that. That's amazing.
I have the little card, or at least a appropriated PRC file of that experience. When you come over to gander at some of the Palms, I'll force you to play around.
All right, yeah, I'm on my way after this call.
Literally, he is literally getting in the car now. We've always handhelds.
Yep. Hold on, let me look up your address here. This is a full desktop PC.
Ah, the libretto, yes.
Oh, libretto.
Oh, you see,
That's close.
The libretto certainly coming closer. I hadn't even thought about. I remember the libretto, and I remember an executive at the company. My dad got me like a summer internship at the place he worked, and one of the executives had a libretto, but he literally left it docked for whole. I never saw that thing out of its dock.
It was never broken
I'd
free.
like to have a libretto.
Yeah, I love it. When I was a kid, that's a vivid memory of seeing that in magazines. Picture of a libretto, and like, how small is it running Windows 95? It seemed like magic to me.
Yeah, you could just have a real computer anywhere.
Yeah. Well, okay.
It's a dream, isn't it?
It is, and that's the distinction, isn't it, between the sub notebooks and my handheld? Because my handhelds, as much as Microsoft would want you to believe that Windows Mobile and Windows Pocket PC were full-fledged desktop operators, they weren't. They had a lot of limitations. I mean, they definitely had one limitation. They came with Internet Explorer.
Well, it's funny that, people really tried, like we had the competition, right, between the pen-based devices and the palm top style devices, where I have in the other room, I have a Philips Velo that I found at a thrift shop for like $10 in the box with all this. It still works. Last I turned it on about a year ago. Monochrome screen, but it had an Indiglow and other things. And I never actually used all my Windows CE stuff that I used was all pen. I mean, you could use a pen on it, but it was stuff that was pen first, whereas something that actually had the keyboard. And the experience of using this these ultra wide screens that didn't have much vertical real estate, that had a taskbar, a freaking taskbar that's chewing up, like, I'll be generous and say, 3/8 of, or maybe slightly less than a quarter of an inch, 1/4 of the screen. That taskbar just chewed up so much space. And you're like, okay, I'm just trying to imagine, some guy who is in an airport somewhere with this little thing, and he's just quickly like, okay, I've got my spreadsheet open. I'm punching in all my numbers. I'm trying to, bring out this really big business deal. I'm just mashing away on this little keyboard. And I'm like, why would somebody subject themselves to this when you realize it's like, well, it's either that or you schlep your, before a libretto, you would schlep your, 6-pound laptop everywhere.
Yeah.
So like you can see why people, they really wanted to make that work because they didn't want to have to lug around all those backbreaking stuff, and they were willing to accept a lot of compromise.
Yeah, and the 2-pound charger for it and all this other stuff that it was not just a thin MacBook or something that lasts for 10 hours or more on a battery. It's like every PC of that era was like 3 inches thick. It had a huge power adapter, and you had a passive matrix screen. So
it was not good days for portable computing. I mean, obviously very pioneering, but nowhere near what we've got now. And it's, I remember my sort of like this is really cool moment was with my Tungsten T2 and my aforementioned Sony Ericsson. So my Sony Ericsson was after this. I had like a Nokia brick at the time of the handspring visor. But I had a T610, which was a great phone because it had infrared, and you could use the infrared as a GPRS modem.
Because infrared is really just a serial port.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah. So I was at work, and when nothing was happening, because I was working night shifts. Basically, I worked night shifts putting newspapers inside of other newspapers.
Those ads got to get in there somehow.
Well, it was the property pages and things like it literally was. And I mean, just for, do you know the job title? Hand inserter.
A perfect title for this podcast episode.
Perfect title.
Yes.
No notes.
Hand inserter. Oh no. But for me, connecting, and this will bring back, connecting to my AOL Instant Messenger, my AIM account through some Palm app that I got. I'm trying to remember what else. I had also that TV remote app. I think
I mentioned it.
Steve mentioned that. I had that. Never worked. Could never get it to pair properly. Like, trying to control. I'm like, Mom, Dad, we can replace all the remotes in the house, except for the
plans.
Except for the cable box, which doesn't use infrared, and for some reason, early Virgin, NTL cable and Virgin boxes used RF for remotes. So that was, I think, maybe was it the TiVos? No, it was early TiVos that did not use infrared. Well, at least the ones that Virgin Media sold didn't. Anyway, but for me, that was a moment, like being able to chat with my friends on a little Palm top. A little palm, a little tungsten thing. Oh yeah, it was brilliant. I loved it.
That's the future.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really interesting the evolution that we've gone, because we don't, I mean, obviously coming up on about an hour of recording at this point, and it's a great conversation, but I just want to highlight that these sort of devices, this class of device does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
To my knowledge. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong. Is there,
Yeah, even Apple's iPod Touch is no longer a thing, and that was basically everything an iPhone was without the cellular. And I remembered all those connectivity options. Like I had a Nokia 5100 series or something like that. And I was so starved for internet connection that there was an SMS relay service for Yahoo Messenger. And so I had to convince all of my AOL Instant Messenger friends, all 2 of them, to use Yahoo Messenger so I could spam them while I was at school or something. And we all soon so quickly forget that there were all these different services or in different platforms. It wasn't, since you didn't have a cellular radio in there, it wasn't just SMS texting. You had to use something like AOL or MSN or all these other things. And, not everyone was on everything.
Well, she's still, look, we're back at a green bubble situation, aren't we?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, yeah, and you had to make sure that your ISP had a gateway or something that could go and take care of those things, because I never had a trio. So I never had something like that. I was the dumb nerd who would say, okay, I've got my laptop in my backpack at all times. I'm just going to do a little bit of war walking and try to find like open access points or whatever, the things we do in the year of our Lord 2006. But
good old 802.11g. Was G would have been a thing then, wouldn't it?
B was the first one.
Well, in 2006 it would have been G.
Yeah.
Before that it was B before that. But it's like,
I would have
just carrying the laptop around. And, yeah.
Sorry, I would have done horrible things for the Palm SDIO Wi-Fi card for whatever tungsten I had at the time.
Yes.
Wireless. Because I got a hint of Bluetooth connectivity, which involved a very rigorous setup on an iBook to share an internet connection from Ethernet to Bluetooth, so I could be 5 feet away and go on AOL Instant Messenger and have it crap out 10 minutes later, because that was the future.
You mean instead of just having a laptop with AOL Instant Messenger on it? Yeah.
Yeah, we can't make any sense. That's not happening.
But, we don't have, back when these devices existed, we started to see the standalone PDAs phase out for things like the Trio, for things like the HTC Windows mobile devices. And then I think once iPhone and Android became
and BlackBerry too.
And BlackBerry, it's interesting. I found the other day my sister's old BlackBerry. I think it's an old. Is it a Curve, maybe? It's either a Curve or a Bold. But BlackBerry, again, that's a name you don't hear now in devices. They are now services. They are IT, I don't even think they do. Is BBM still a thing?
That's a good question. It's funny. I remember I want to say in like 2004, I was at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. I was seeing these big billboards. It must have been a deal that United was doing with BlackBerry. They were doing this advertising, say, get this BlackBerry phone for, some remarkably cheap price that I still couldn't afford because I was a broke college student. And they don't tell you that, okay, the phone is this much, but in order to get, data service, you're going to pay through the nose monthly for data service. And I thought I was really tempted by that, but I'm like, no, that would be I was this close to being a BlackBerry guy, but it didn't happen.
I keep forgetting BlackBerry because BlackBerry again was its own. They started off as just like effectively email pages, didn't they? And
yeah.
With little key, yeah. And then they morphed into similar devices and smartphones. You had obviously. I'm trying to think. You had the Palm Trios. You had all the HTC devices. I mean, it's very interesting, isn't it? When Windows Mobile started to go away and it got replaced by Windows Phone, which controversial maybe. Windows Phone 7 and 8 were not bad platforms.
They were really good, actually. I think you found a lot of people would agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem was, and I think I said this the other day, talking to someone on Mastodon, the problem was that Microsoft was so focused on killing the iPhone that they didn't bother to get developer support for the things.
Yeah.
Wait, they didn't kill the iPhone? They had the funeral. I saw pictures.
I remember covering it on that was just that was the Balmer era, wasn't it? That was the Balmer era.
Yeah.
So
he really balmed it.
No balm for this.
Our friend Mike is obsessed with that last attempt for the Windows Phone, and he still swears it was a great platform. And I remember helping a coworker with one, and it was very interesting what they were doing with it. But yeah, I mean, they sort of pulled an Apple with the Lisa, where they got they thought they had everything, and then they had no developer support, so the thing died.
And it wasn't just that. They also, I feel like, their hardware just wasn't quite there. Like, they hitched their wagon to Nokia, and unfortunately, Nokia, I don't think they could have delivered the goods. The operating system, I mean, I had a friend of mine who his first job at Microsoft was working on Windows Phone. Like, he developed like device drivers and things like that. I mean, every time I remember using a Windows Phone, I'm always like, yeah, I'm digging the interface. I like the style. I liked a lot of things about using it. It's like, okay, but I can't do anything else on it. If they had been out like exactly like a year after Apple, like if unfortunately they didn't have the insider knowledge that Google did to, get ahead of things on Android. But if they were able to get out just a year before, I think there was a lot of things that went wrong with Windows Phone, but I don't think it was because it's yet another example of a really good product that just didn't have anybody to buy it, or, just fell apart because everybody was coalescing around it was the third wheel that fell apart, just like Casio.
Yeah.
Wasn't that Lumina wasn't there one with like a 40 megapixel camera, 41 megapixel camera or something? And I remember the ad for that was just insane. Yeah. And then I remember seeing the actual like Engadget reviewer like, the camera full quality is okay, but one of those things where they were really trying it, and it was interesting to have that competition. But yeah, like you said, the third wheel is not really going to last.
No, when you've got powerhouses like obviously Apple and then Google with Android, where every single OEM was making Android devices and still are, HTC shifted entirely to Android phones and actually started making those marketing those in their own right. You've obviously had Motorola on the Android bandwagon, LG, I'm trying to think. Sony. Sony went. Because the Xperia were really good Android phones. Like, they were some of the best Android phones, like stylish phones at the time. And again, I think we've lost standalone digital assistants. I like that word, digital assistants. I don't mean like Siri. I mean like things that don't have, maybe have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but don't have a cellular connection. But then again, when we've got smartphones, why do we need them? And wrapping up question, man, because we could talk for a lot longer. Maybe we will actually, because knowing this panel, we will still talk for a long time. Is there anything, do you think, that we are missing from because I don't think we're all iPhone users. I have a feeling some of us are Android users for our daily smartphone.
I use an iPhone.
You're an iPhone?
I switched. I'm on iPhone now.
Oh, you're on iPhone now. Okay, fine. And I'm guessing so we're all iPhone users. Okay, fine.
I'm still on the Newton.
That doesn't mean the iPhone is the only thing I have, but my primary phone is an iPhone.
Okay. So, if we take the two platforms that are out there right now, and obviously, folks, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments, in the Discord thread. Come and talk to us. Are there things that you think we're missing from our modern iPhones, our modern Android devices that had that magic in the days of our Palms, our iPacs, our Genados, our Clies, our Casio what was it, 150, E150s?
E125.
125. What's missing from our modern devices?
Graffiti.
Physical
instability.
buttons.
Graffiti.
Antennas.
Antennas.
Add-ons.
You know what? Here's the thing. This is not necessarily related to PDAs, but there is something that we have lost in our move to our modern phones. At first we lost it when we went to cell phones, but then it came back because we had flip phones. The act of hanging up on somebody is just not satisfying anymore, because in the old landline days, you could go, oh yeah, screw you. And then you could just go slam the thing on you hear a cling, and the person on the other end of the line will hear the noise when you're doing phone. And with cell phones, when we got flip phones, you can say, oh yeah, well, I don't like you. You flip the phone, you get the nice satisfying thunk, that action. And we don't have that in regular phones anymore. And it was funny because
that's a good one.
With the IQ, the GPS antenna on it flips out like a flip phone. So it's got that satisfying, thunk when you close it. And that's what I feel like with our slabs of aluminum, titanium, glass, whatever. We've lost a little bit of that physicality that comes with devices. So even though I do not want a hardware keyboard anymore, I will take the trade in the screen space, but I have to admit, you do miss the tactility of buttons sometimes. They are kind of useful.
I will actually agree with you on that. Yeah. Sean, you just made a really good point, which I wanted to touch on. So we are going to touch on it. Graffiti. Okay. So people thinking, what, you mean we need to spray paint our phones? No. Graffiti was Palm's way of writing on your PDA. But the idea was that you learnt their way of writing certain letters. I'll put a link to graffiti in the show notes because it took some getting used to, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. You know what I think it was? Because they wanted it to have handwriting recognition, but everybody's handwriting is so different and the computing power was so limited. They were like, well, we can't do that. Why don't we make them write it our way? So they came up with graffiti. And then, much less variation in how people were going to write these very specific little glyphs that sort of resembled letters. Yeah, so it did take some getting used to, and I don't think I ever really got used to it.
Well, I've seen people who are good at graffiti, like they can fly. Yeah. They can really, even faster, I think, than somebody who was doing little membrane keyboard, because here, I showed it in the thing, but I've got this HP LX200 here, which actually does run MS-DOS and has a CGA-compatible screen. So theoretically, you can do certain things. I've even got a PCMCIA flash memory card that was pulled out of some Nortel Networks thing. But that's how you would get storage in if you didn't want to do a serial cable. But this little keyboard, when you're using just your two thumbs, you're not really getting advantage of like a real keyboard where you can use all 10 fingers. Like you could try using more than two thumbs to type on this thing, but it's not very fun.
No.
You get somebody who's good at graffiti. It's like I watched somebody once with a palm just going, hand is just flying everywhere. And I'm like, how are you so good at this? Because my graffiti skills, I'm like Sean, like I'm okay, but I'm not, I'm not a wizard like some of these people. It's amazing.
They went through all that effort to build up that skill.
I know.
And now it's gone.
I still remember some of those. I was playing around with one the other day and I'm like, I could type a little bit on this, but, nothing like the physical keyboard of the Treo 90, which was the non-cell phone version of the organizer that I'm holding up now. That keyboard was pretty good. I typed a lot of middle school science notes on that, and what I loved about it is it had infrared, and so did the printers in our schoolrooms. And I could just walk up to one of those printers, and I would beam my science notes and get a 100% grade on every single time we had to show our work, because it was, I don't know, I guess it was just me tinkering with a gadget, and it was like, hey, I'm doing work, but this is also fun. And then, of course, my friends were like, well, you already have the notes typed up. Why don't you just print me a copy,
Well, you got to say, okay, $5 a pep.
Yeah, and now you're thinking.
Oh, wow. I found, let me put this is from Wikimedia. I'll put a link to the actual article. That is the Palm graffiti layout. And I'm just looking at it and remembering how hard that was to do things like the F and the T.
It didn't help that Palm had to change graffiti after a while because Xerox sued him over it.
Oh,
and
really?
That's right. They had to change some of the strokes. So they had graffiti 2 after a certain point, and he had to go and relearn everything again.
Oh, wow. The percent symbol looks a little bit erotic.
Yeah, I remember using the on-screen keyboard for anything other than just letters and numbers. It was just easier.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, because, of course, a lot of these early Palm devices had, what was it we called the silk screen? Was it the silk screen? Where it was a dedicated graffiti pad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one half was for letters and the other half was for numbers and other characters, whereas the IQ was the first one to have the collapsible virtual graffiti zone.
That's it.
Which is interesting that Palm was not the first company to have that on their own thing.
No, which is really interesting. But graffiti, just an incredible way of input. But yeah, obviously you've got you've got a little bit of handwriting recognition on modern devices, but I type everything, I'm double thumb. I'm actually quite good at double thumb typing now on my iPhone keyboard. I do use handwriting. I think we call it Scribble. Is it Scribble on the iPad?
I have to say, there's some of that Newton technology is still lurking in there, because if you remember when they brought Inkwell to the Mac in like 10.3 or something, it was still basically the Newton recognition, because you could do one of the old like Newton Easter eggs and it would still recognize it.
Oh wow! Okay.
And that's still, as far as I know, you can still do Inkwell in macOS. I think it's been a while. Like I would do it with my Wacom tablet. With my Cintiq, because you could have the little zone open and it's like, oh, I can just handwrite something in there. And
yeah, I think they took it out.
I have to believe I'm sure they probably would have. Yeah. But I have to imagine that some of that still lives on in the iPad.
No, yeah, I just, sorry, something in my throat. Yeah, Inkwell was neat because it was sort of, I think, on the desktop, at least for the Mac, one of the first explorations I ever dealt with where you were using your pen on a tablet, not just for drawing, but there was some text-based stuff. And it wasn't perfect, but it was neat. And that came out with Jaguar. And looking at the wiki, it says Mojave was the last one that had it because it was 32-bit. And I guess Catalina pushed that away. But it is interesting to see like the iPad Air a few years ago did have like the Scribble thing that you guys are talking about. I think that, sort of is the successor to that, where you could just scribble something and it would maybe make it text or just leave it alone.
Well, I use it for occasionally if I'm feeling lazy. I will use it to write the chapter titles when I'm editing in Fevright, and it does the most of the time work. So it's actually quite impressive. But that just reminds me, and I'm sure one of you's got one of these, or if not, we know someone who does. The Axia, is it the Axia mod book?
Sean, you have one of those, I thought.
No.
We've played with one. Our friend Ken has one.
Oh, I was going to say, I know Ken definitely
Colin has one. Yeah.
Oh, he has it, yeah.
Yeah, Ken's
yeah.
got one.
You could see them at VCF. People usually bring them and draw on them, and they're a lot of fun. I always wanted one, but I could never afford it back in the day.
And just to be clear, we're talking about Ken of Crazy Ken,
the Computer Clan.
Yep,
Yeah,
Computer Clan.
And I'm going to guess Colin from This Does Not Compute.
Mm-hmm.
No, the other Colin from DOS Dude 1. He does a lot of crazy
DOS
mods
Dude.
and such. Yeah.
Oh, I love DOS Dude stuff. I love Colin. I love This Does Not Compute as well. But I mean, look, we've got brilliant. All three of you are brilliant YouTubers. Colin just seems to make almost like, I want to say this correctly, retro system porn when he's shooting his B-roll.
You can get a lot
certainly
done with focus pulls.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly there's a style to that, which is really great. I love trying to emulate some of those shots and then like breathing too hard and the camera moves. I'm like,
It is fascinating. Now, Steve put a really good question. I think I do want to start. Is there any other thoughts on what we're missing in our modern phones and modern smart devices?
The one thing I thought of, and I think it was 2016, was the Motorola Z. There you could add on these like hardware mod things to it. Mm-hmm. I that just comes to mind because I think that was sort of like the last hurrah in the phone world, at least in recent memory, of trying to get away from everything just being whatever came with the phone came with it. I think there was a speaker system. I'm looking at a list here now. There was a projector that you could add on to this. There was a gamepad. There was an extra 360-degree camera. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but after this, I'm going to hop on eBay and search for some of these stupid add-ons for this thing because that just sounds cool.
But actually, that is a really good point because now with, at least in this generation, with everything, every smartphone now being USB-C with Apple moving, yeah, we've lost that. But also, we talked about like the PCMCIA Ethernet adapters, right?
Yeah.
But now,
you can plug a USB-C Ethernet dongle right into your phone, and it does work.
It does, absolutely. That will work. You can, obviously put SD cards in. I think, haven't I seen, in theory, wouldn't a USB floppy drive work as well?
Yes.
Yes.
I saw somebody tried that.
LGR did it.
LGR did, of course. LGR did it. Yeah, of course he did. Because but it's fascinating, isn't it? But I mean, with the latest versions of iOS, you could even do video capture now straight into iOS.
Oh yeah.
So I could plug my little HDMI capture box or something that actually was a bit more USB-C. This is. Can I make my plea? My once a year plea to manufacturers: if I see a micro USB on your device, you have failed.
Yeah, ban all that filth.
Yeah, it's just USB-C everywhere. Heck, even my blood pressure monitor thing has the ability to be powered by USB-C. Like.
Yeah, that's because your blood pressure will go up if you put the USB in the wrong way and you have to fiddle with it. That's good UX right there.
Yeah. I like that. But Steve, Steve asked a really good question in our little Squadcast chat that we got going on here, so the question Steve asked, we've obviously talked about our first Palm, our first handheld, but Steve's asked two questions. What were our first dumb phones on our first smartphones? Oh. So I think, Steve, you get to answer that one first.
Sure. So my first dumb phone was either a Nokia 5100, and I think later on it was a 3300. It was a hand-me-down from a friend. I had the prepaid service. It was just like bog standard Nokia unbreakable thing.
Yeah. Big and brick of a thing, yeah.
Yeah, and my first cell phone, which I got, I think, right before entering high school, because the whole reason of me having it was, to keep in contact with my folks and such. And there was the choice between a Sony Ericsson, which had a camera, or the N-Gage QD, which could play games.
Oh, God.
So naturally, I went with the N-Gage QD. And I will tell you, I loved that stupid thing. It had Bluetooth. It had internet. I had a 1 megabyte data limit for a month, and I never went over it. I never exceeded it. And I tried. I had the Mac Rumors message boards on there. I was keeping up with all the latest Star Wars rumors, as one does with a N-Gage. I, quickly wore out the SD card flap that would keep the card in there because, you could put, I think it was the Symbian OS that also ran. So there was emulators and junk that people had on there. It was such a fun device. And everything but a camera, like it had everything I wanted but a camera. So that was like, what a foray into smartphones, having this quirky little taco shaped little device that, it was actually a lot of fun. They were pretty neat. And I miss sort of that excitement of silliness that, hey, I could just download this weird app and hack this phone with something. There's sort of an end of that these days, but that was my experience.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, the N-Gage QD. I mean, that thing does not look comfortable to use as an actual phone, though.
Well, thankfully, you didn't have to hold it like the previous generation where it was like sticking completely out like a fin.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, this one was fine. I remember having conversations on it. It was okay. I loved the bright orange interface of it. Yeah, I have to go find mine again and dig it out.
That is a cool device. Sean, what about you? On first smartphone, Steve?
Yeah, I guess the QD would be my first quote unquote smartphone.
Gotcha.
Because it did have Bluetooth, it did have notes and stuff like that, so it was pretty neat.
Yeah, to be fair, that would I'd class that as because Symbian was smart. Sean, what about you? First dumb phone, first smartphone.
Well, so I didn't have a cell phone until I was like 18 because I got a job in a Nextel store and got one through work. So I had like a Nextel, like. I don't know if you're familiar with Nextel, but a lot of like construction-oriented phones and stuff. So I had a huge like yellow chunk of an indestructible Nextel phone that was like 3 inches thick and was just like a brick. And that was my first phone. And then my first smartphone, I think, was the Palm Trio.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Now here's a quick random question for you three, because obviously here in the UK we were always GSM. Were those CDMA devices? I'm going to guess at least the Trio, maybe the Trio and the Nextel were.
The Nokia
we had
one
CDMA,
that I had was,
Verizon, I think, was CDMA.
Okay, which is really interesting because that's not a thing anymore. Like it's just we're just LTE now. Well, yeah, LTE and 5G. It's all GSM. Cool.
Yeah, that's why we can't even force each other to use old phones as a prank anymore, because the service can't be connected.
Yeah, but no CDMA.
Well,
anymore.
that's not technically true. T-Mobile still has a 2G service.
Ooh,
wow!
You can still hook up an old 2G phone to T-Mobile.
Hold on, let me dig out my palm.
GSM 2G phone though.
Yeah, and if you want to see confirmation of that, if you're in the States here, if you have a phone, you can say, like my Android phone here, I can set it to 2G only, and then tell it to search for networks, and the only available network is T-Mobile. It's pretty cool. So
my first dumb phone, it technically still it could play Snake. I also had a Nokia 5100 something that was still an analog cell phone. It was not a digital one.
Oh, wow.
Because that one was a hand-me-down. It was like the last gasp of analog phones. This is like 2002, I think. Analog phones were going away pretty quickly. I want to say like a year or two later, I wound up getting some Motorola digital, CDMA, some prepaid thing. I didn't have a contract or a postpaid. So, but yeah, I remember that Nokia 5100 something, held on to that for a while. And the one that replaced it, I held on until I got a Razr is a phone that was slightly smart. It did have WAP, so I could theoretically look at some websites. I could use AOL Instant Messenger on it. And, so it had some smarts, but I did not own a Trio. I didn't own a Windows Mobile phone. I basically, my first smartphone was the first iPhone, iPhone 2G. I bought that with my first bonus check from a job that I had just gotten that year. And I've been on the iPhone train ever since.
My first smartphone, my first dumb phone, so I own myself, was, I think, Nokia 51.
Who didn't have a Nokia 5100?
I think it was a 5110 because it was, I'll put photos in all this. So yeah, 5110. I went through various different phones, like different Nokias, a couple of different phones. But my first true smartphone that wasn't but my first true smartphone would have probably been that orange SPV M500. I think that was my first, no, was it actually? Oh, yeah, I think it was, I think it was the orange SPV M500.
I would say that putting the visor, at least attempting with the visor phone, would have made that because the visor with the visor phone is functionally the same as the first generation Trio.
Right. Unfortunately, I never got the visor phone. It never actually got shipped.
I know, but you tried.
I tried. I get bonus points for it. Yeah. I really wanted that because, and of course, it had no speaker. You would have had to have a little headset with. Or did it? I can't.
Yeah, because I thought they had a micro. You brought up earlier that Handspring documentary. They go into a whole bunch of visor phone stuff in that. So that highly recommend if anybody listening is interested in visor phone stuff, watch that Handspring documentary. It's a very good.
Is that
watch.
the one the Verge put out?
Yes. Yep. It's on YouTube now, so you can. It's much easier to watch it.
That's good. And yeah, because that whole story, Handspring, and how they. Wow, it's just that whole journey of Palm, and
to think all that stuff happened within the span of like 5 years.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, obviously Palm, because Palm sort of came back with the Palm Pre as a iPhone competitor, which never really
WebOS, RIP WebOS.
Oh yeah,
no, it's about WebOS because back then went to HP, didn't it?
Correct, when HP bought Palm. Yeah,
yeah. Now, is that WebOS the same WebOS that is now powering LG TVs?
Yes, it is a descendant of that WebOS. Yep.
Wow. It's not a bad...
I still want an HP touchpad.
I have two.
I'm sure there's tons on eBay.
I got one when they were doing the fire sale, and I accidentally got two somehow. Circuit City, that's how I got mine. The battery is toast, but you could still turn it on maybe.
Yeah, also when Circuit City was itself having a fire sale.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh, we're having a fire sale. Sorry, Tim. It's gonna do it. Sorry, gonna do
Turned into a fired sale.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Oh dear. Just reminds me, of course, of what can only be described as a disaster that was Surface RT when Microsoft tried to make. Yeah, bless them. Do you know where the Windows Mobile UI does not belong?
On a desktop.
On a desktop. Thanks, Windows.
I think that also kind of turned people against Windows Phone, honestly, because, they saw they were, instead of just trying to make a good phone, Microsoft was trying to do the same thing they always did. And, we all saw how well that went for them.
Indeed. Well,
I like Windows 8. I think it was nice.
Wow, Mr. Contrarian here.
Wow. Sean, who are you and what have you done with Action Retro? Because that's
Well, no, I would say is actually very much in his character.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would say that's on brand.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, but it has to be running within a VM within Haiku.
or
it's running on a 486.
486. No, it's running on an old Spark station that's been modded with a 68040, which I know is not a thing, by the way. I do.
It's probably possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all just electrons, you just patch in some wires.
I don't know. You probably could run Haiku on the Sun PCI that I have in my Sunblade Works. It's a 600 megahertz Pentium. I mean, I'm sure you could do something with it.
Space Heater?
No, that's the Power Mac G5.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I keep a load of them in my basement.
Just to, yeah. Was it the G5? Now, because random one, because I just remembered this. They tried to put a G5 into a laptop. I don't think that worked out well at all for them.
No, they never commercially released one. Apparently, the yields were not good.
No, which is why they
little toasty.
A little toasty. I heard a rumor. I don't know if it's true. I heard a rumor that it might have started a fire in a test lab.
That wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me if you went the route of the PowerBook 5300.
Oh dear. Anyway,
if they got him into an iMac, they could get it into a laptop.
Yeah,
it would just be one of those very large laptops like we used to have back in the day.
Big fans.
I mean, you have a Dremel, Sean. I think you should try and do it.
That's a bucket list build I want to do, is build the world's only G5 laptop. Just take an iMac.
An iMac G5. I like that idea. I do like.
So how
that
many
idea.
car batteries do you need?
Steve, do you have any 17-inch iMac G5s I could borrow? I'll give it back.
If you watched my channel, you know I have plenty. Yeah, borrow. I don't know if I want it back after I know what you're going to do to it.
It's absolutely totally normal computing, isn't it, Sean?
Totally normal.
Totally normal. Thank you so much, folks. This honestly has been a great discussion. I hope people have had a bit of a chance to reminisce. I mean, I think, we look at where we are today and the devices we all use over history to some of these early handhelds. And, I think the thing that still strikes me, even after all this time, is that the ARM still, just my mind still boggles on this, but the ARM processor that we all rely on for our smartphones, like everyone, started off in good old Cambridge here in the UK.
Yeah.
As the BBC, BBC as a thing for it was Acorn, wasn't it? Acorn, and it was going to be a bit part of a BBC Micro master. Very, very interesting. Jay's just messaged me because she's still backstage, reminding me to finish up with one phrase: "Eat up, Martha."
Perfect.
Oh, come on!
I think there's no better way to. That sums up our entire experience, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It really does. So let's get some outros done and make sure people get a chance to plug stuff. So we're going to go in, we'll go in reverse alphabetical order. So Steve, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on YouTube at Mac84. I'm almost at 20,000 subscribers, so maybe you want to subscribe, hopefully. I'm also on other social media things, handle as Mac84TV. And Mac84.net has a bunch of repair guides and junk like that too. So feel free to check that out. Preferably on your Palm OS device.
Absolutely. Oh, there you go, folks. That's what we need, right? Photos of... I'm setting this challenge. Photos of you accessing our guests' sites or, if possible, YouTube channels on Palm devices or any old handheld. If you can do that, you know what? If you can do it, I kid you not, if you can do it, we haven't quite got all the Crosswire stickers done. If people send them in and have got stuff like that, I will, up to a certain value, give you a Crosswire sticker. All right?
Nice.
There you go.
I do have a retro-enabled website, so I'm sorry in advance for your sticker costs.
First 4 customers only, folks. No, jeez. Okay, thanks, Steve. Sean, where can people find you?
Oh, yeah, I am on the internet. Yeah.
Really?
You can find me on the YouTube website, the modern one, not accessible via Palm, I don't think. Unless you really soup up your Palm Pilot. I don't know. You overclock it. But yeah, I'm Action Retro on the YouTube.
You are. Do check out, make it sure. Jay's like literally backseat driving this show. Jay's actually upped the ante here, folks. Jay's upped the ante for the best photo we get of someone accessing. I think we need to have a photo or of any of the guest YouTube channels or sites. The best photo, go and submit those in my Discord. Come and join my Discord and submit them there. Or podcast@crosswires.net if you don't want to use Discord for whatever reason. You can have, Jay said you can have any piece of merch in the store.
All right.
But of course,
frogfind.com is going to work well on any device.
There we go.
Give that a shot.
Oh, I think, that, okay, that's not, no, that works. That's fine. That is absolutely fine. That works too. Sorry. Jay, of course, is counting on this going on my credit card, not hers. But yes, I'll honestly do that. Dan, where can people find you?
Yeah, I can also be found online. You go to my YouTube channel, Userlandia. It's also a website of the same name, which nowadays is mostly just transcripts of stuff posting on YouTube. But we're all on the social meds, on the Blue Skies and the Mastodon. So there's links there if you wanna follow or hang out. But yeah, just of all the people in here, subscribe to this podcast, subscribe to everybody's YouTube channels, and share the wealth.
Absolutely. And as always, look, I honestly enjoy having you three on the show so much because you derail everything. It's amazing. Yes. We talk, these episodes tend to be our longest episodes, but I genuinely hope people have got something from this. Let's have a discussion. And of course, it goes without saying. I'm trying to think what we need to do next. What's our next panel discussion? Let's have a think what it could be.
Unix.
Fax machines.
Favorite Unix experience.
This is a Unix system. I know this.
I know what we should do.
Oh no, go on.
We should do our favorite experiences with a printer.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
AKA the Steve Show.
It's just 47 minutes of image writer noises.
Oh, ASMR image writer. Okay.
There you go. It'll be your most popular episode, and you'll be like, why?
Oh, geez. I remember when I did not know anything about Macs, trying to get I think it was a Color Classic, trying to get a printer working with it. I had no clue about Mac OS. Well, it wasn't even Mac OS. It was System something. System 7, maybe?
Yeah.
No idea what I was doing. Honestly, no idea. Printers are
just plug it in and go to the chooser.
Yeah, it didn't work.
What's a chooser?
What's it? What? You got to remember, final thought. I was very anti-Apple in my younger days. I did not come over to Apple land until the Intel era. So, shame on me, I guess. Anyway, folks, thank you very much for listening. We will see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Crosswires. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So please drop us a note over to podcast@crosswires.net. Why not come and join our Discord community over at crosswires.net/Discord. We've got lots of text channels, we've even got voice channels, and we've got forum posts for every episode that we put out there. If you're a Mastodon, you can also follow us either by heading over to wires.social or just follow crossed@wires.social.
If you'd like to check out more of our content, head on over to crossedwires.net/YouTube for all our videos, and keep an eye on our Twitch channel at crossedwires.net/live for our upcoming streams.
If you like what you heard, please do drop a review in your podcast directory of choice. It really does help spread the word about the show.
And of course, if you can spare even the smallest amount of financial support, we'd be incredibly grateful. And you can support us at ko-fi.com/crossedwires. That is ko-fi.com/crossedwires.
Until next time, thanks for listening.